Tactical Tangents.
Welcome back to Tactical Tangents. This is Mike. I'm sitting down with Austin from Mantis for a special episode to talk about some ways that the Mantis has helped me become a better shooter and some ways that I've used it as a firearms instructor, and more importantly, ways that it can benefit you. For anyone who listens to the show, you already know that Mantis is one of our sponsors, and I think it's worth pointing out that my first Mantis that I ever got was actually one that my wife bought me. It was on my wish list for my birthday one year, and she got it for me years ago. So I actually started out as a customer of Mantis, and then years later, we started the podcast, and as we started to look out there for sponsors, we got the opportunity to partner up with them. So I want to let you guys know going into this that this isn't a sales pitch, right? I actually use this stuff, and I think it's important to let you guys, our listeners, know that we do this for you and that we put you guys first when we decide to partner up with a company. It has to be something that brings value to the audience, and I believe that Mantis does that. I really use it. I encourage all shooters at all levels to go out and get one and try it. You know, Jim and I run this podcast around our own full-time jobs. We have careers, we have demanding assignments, and on one hand, that means that since this doesn't pay the bulk of our bills, we can be selective about who we work for, which means that we can go out and find guys like Austin and companies like Mantis who make good partners and who are doing and creating things that our listeners want or maybe even need. And that being said, I also have to admit that having a quote-unquote real job around wives and young kids and things like that also means that doing the show without the support of our sponsors would be nearly impossible. So we're grateful to them. We hope that our listeners out there who like what we're doing will go help support us by supporting them and checking out what they have to offer. So go do it. Austin, welcome. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Mike.
Yeah, this is awesome. It's not very often that we get a chance to highlight the stuff that we're really energetic about, and Mantis is definitely one of those things. Anyone that I work with they know that, hey, do you have the thing with the thing that goes on the gun that can do that? Yeah, man, here you go. You want to try it out? So it's awesome. So a lot of our listeners out there who don't already have a Mantis mostly just hear Jim and I talk about it in short bursts. And I'm curious how you would describe the Mantis and what you guys are creating. How would you describe it to someone who's never heard about it before?
Great question. And it really depends on who we're talking to. But the core premise of everything that we create, Mantis X and other systems we create, is all designed around helping every shooter at every level improve. So regardless of capability, experience, a ton, very little, everything in between, regardless of what you shoot, we want you to train on your weapon system. We want you to improve with that weapon system. So we are laser focused on that premise. Mantis X, you were an OGX, is what we call it. The original Mantis X product came out a little over 5 years ago. The first product we put out on the market. And what it is a rail-mounted Bluetooth high-precision motion tracking sensor. A lot of big words in there, but it just tracks the movement of the gun throughout the shooting process, sends the information over Bluetooth to an app on your smartphone or tablet. It gives you real-time feedback on your shooting mechanics. So it analyzes all the movement, collects the data about how the gun is moving, how the shooter is moving the gun, I should say, before, during, and after the shot. And then it saves and analyzes the data surrounding each shot, and gives you real-time feedback on what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, and then how to correct what you're doing wrong. So it's a combination of a piece of hardware that you mount on your firearm, and then a piece of software that's on your smartphone that works fantastically. And it's constantly subject to free app updates. So when you were an OGX user, I don't know when you bought when your wife bought you your OGX, but the software experience, I'm sure, is vastly different today than it was. Yeah. And all those updates are free. That's where we spend all our monies in software development from an R&D and engineering perspective, obviously on the hardware side too. But this is a buy this product once and benefit from the improvements forever for free.
And
so,
sorry, I was gonna say that the OG Mantis, I've used that as like a loaner. My brother-in-law has it right now, actually, because it is still functionally used. Like you said, the app is where a lot of it is, and it still works just as well as the X10 in a lot of ways. I mean, the X10 has its features that make it a better investment, and a couple other, the shooting drills and stuff. But that OG one is still great.
Still humming along. So how many years ago did you get it?
You and I think first talked at SHOT Show in 2019, 18. And so I probably had at least a couple years on the on the X prior to that. So
yeah, so you're looking at
it had to be pretty new. if you're saying 5 years.
Yeah, and that thing's a tank. We design all of our products to last a long time. We design the products first and foremost for ourselves, solve our own problems. So we're not just putting out stuff that we think people will want. It's something that we would want both in terms of product as well as customer experience with the company in terms of longevity of the product, solid warranty, any issues, you can call the person, talk to them on the phone, as well as email and chat support as well. But make sure that we take care of customers as just like we'd like to be taking care of ourselves. So thrilled that you've had an experience that's been positive and it's lasted this long for you.
Yeah, and it, like I said, it still goes strong. I mean, I won't ever use it because I'll use the X10 because it's just 1,000 times better. Just the quick disconnect and the form factor of it and the other drills that it does, which we can get into later if you want. But and there's actually two things in there that I wanted to touch on. The first is you mentioned that it was it's hardware and it's software, but I think it's notable that the way that interfaces with the user is also to help the user correct their own hardware and software problems, which is the user sees the feedback that they can use to, mentally process what they need to do differently and then mechanically process how they're controlling the gun to make those improvements, which is ultimately why this is such a big deal, because it's a lot of feedback that even as a firearms instructor, there's a lot, I can't see what is in the minds of my students. I can't see those micro little movements that happen right before the shot break, the way the Mantis is. And so you can use it in that way too. The other thing I wanted to touch on real quick was in the box, when you get the Mantis, there's a little thing. It's like a "Did you know" card. And it says that the first Mantis was an Android smartphone that was like rubber banded to a gun. Is that true?
Yeah, I actually have a picture of that. So that was not the first Mantis. That was our first foray into discovering what Mantis could do. So we had this idea back in 2014. So it's been 7 years now of and going back to your first point, kind of tying those two together. When you're shooting, a lot happens that we can't see because it happens so quickly and it's so loud. Our eyes can't sample at a rate fast enough to really perceive what's going on. And our body, because the big bang and the big recoil is sometimes, it's all live fire, of course. The sensory feedback in our body, what happens is a big event happens and our brain tries to then recreate what happened. And it can tell the truth or it can lie. It tries to fill in the gaps, right? So it gets these snippets of information. It's like a 1,000-piece puzzle and it has 6 or 7 pieces and it tries to paint this picture for you. But it's just deficient. Our brains are amazing, but in a high-speed event like that, it's just incomplete. And so when we were training ourselves, shooting ourselves, not literally shooting ourselves, but when we're shooting by ourselves, or when we're training with instructors, there's a big gap in terms of information feedback, right? So typically, historically, an instructor will watch either the student or the target. Can't watch both, obviously, at the same time. A student or a shooter will watch the target and say, okay, I shot it this way and it felt like this, so maybe I need to make this type of adjustment. But really a lot of more questions than answers in that process. And unfortunately, I know you're not like this as a firearms instructor, but some instructors, they fill in the gaps and it can be erroneous information. And with I'm not trying to slight instructors, but we're trying to create tools that help instructors, that help shooters and instructors both, by giving them data-driven, quantitative, objective feedback. So it's not opinion-based. It's not filling in the gaps. It just is what it is. The data does not lie. When we provide this high-frequency data set at that caliber of quality, then instructors and shooters alike can improve the quality of the experience by leaps and bounds. So really, when you get down to it, that's what Mantis is doing. Is it's enabling us to get insights we couldn't otherwise gain. And the human body is amazing at recognizing patterns and reacting and adapting. But without the feedback loop in there that tells them exactly what's happening, sometimes that feedback loop can get broken and people can get frustrated. So we kind of hit plateaus with ourselves in our shooting, which is why we wanted to get to the next level through data-driven quantitative feedback. And we realized that with other people too. A lot of new shooters get into the market and they start shooting and they get frustrated because they don't get better. And when people don't get better, they stop doing what they're doing. And if we want to keep people in the industry, keep people in the sport, we need to help them and enable them to improve more efficiently. So, that's kind of in a nutshell, kind of a little bit more about why we do what we do. Um, I would say that the hardware piece and the software piece, talking about how we've adapted over time, it's really driven a lot by customer feedback. We are our first customers, and so if we want something for ourselves, we build it. But we listen vigorously to the community, and suggestions and feedback that customers have that come back to us. We put down the priority list. We discuss vigorously in house to decide what makes the cut, what doesn't, in terms of software development feature set. But again, we pride ourselves. It's a company ethos that we listen to the customer, not just how they like the product, but how they want to see the product improve. So our number one question I always ask people, and they're like, "Oh, I love their product." It's, well, oh, great, I'm glad it's working for you. What else can we add for you to help it improve? So that's why you've seen over the years, we've had lots of new different modes of shooting, different drills, different courses, different ways to train, different dimensions of your training that we analyze that we couldn't analyze before, that our R&D team has been successfully developing over the years. So that's just kind of where we're at right now, and we have a long product roadmap in front of us. We always joke that we're about 20% done with all the features we want to add. In a year from now, we'll probably be 20% done, even though we've added a bunch of stuff, just because that product roadmap keeps on growing.
That's awesome, though. And there's a couple things that you said in there that really, I guess, resonated with me. One is, I was a brand new shooter once, and I had that instructor that you were talking about that kept telling me, "You're not gripping hard enough with your support hand. You're not gripping hard enough with your support hand. You're not gripping hard." And it ended up being not helpful. I would grip harder with my support hand, and there was a missing link in there that speaks exactly to what you're saying. And so it kind of leads into another point that you talked about, which this is for all levels of shooters. I mean, a beginner can use this really, really well. I've used, there's a friend of mine that I'm working with right now, brand new shooter. She's never shot before, and we wanted, ammo prices are crazy right now, right? So I started teaching her. I said, "Hey, how about this? We're going to do just dry fire only, and we're going to get her up over 1,000 shots in dry fire," which was a threshold I got from you, and we can talk about if you want. We want to get over 1,000 shots in dry fire before we go hit the range. And now we've got her at a point where if we go out to the range and I can say, "Hey, I want you to shoot a 90 or better on this next shot," because she starts jerking the trigger or something like that, she knows what that means, because it means something to her in her head and in her mechanics and how she manipulates the gun. So you can use it with brand new shooters. You can use it as instructors. And even as a guy, I wouldn't call myself an advanced shooter, but I've been carrying one professionally long enough that I have to be decent with it, right? And even a guy like me, I use it myself before qualifications, before, whenever I want to kick the rust off, or if I'm chasing that sub 1 second draw to first shot and I want to refine stuff. I mean, everyone has something to gain from it. And if you've listened to anything that Austin has said over the past few minutes, and you guys can't see this because we're talking on a video conference call, but there's a whiteboard in the background here with a bunch of, I don't know, as far as I can tell, it's just calculus or something. But I mean, this is stuff, they're very serious about being data driven. And this isn't based, it's not a gimmick, right? It's not just a toy, it's not a game, it's not a phone game or something. It's actual data, and there's a lot of science and engineering background and stuff that I probably wouldn't understand that goes into this as a guy that just sits on the other end and pulls the trigger. So there's a lot to be had from what you guys are doing.
Yeah, you bring up a couple good points. If I could interject here, just to hammer home a little bit. First about perishable skills, dry fire, and thresholds. So it's not like riding a bike. Shooting a gun is a perishable skill. You can't just pick it up 2 years later and expect to be in the same place. Now, you're not going to drop back to zero and be, running on one of those scooter bikes or starting off one of those scooter bikes again, but it diminishes fairly rapidly. So it is something that has to be kept up. And especially for those that carry or aspire to carry, that's a right that you're exercising. But with that, there's also a companion responsibility that you need to be competent with that firearm. And if you're not training, you're not exercising that right in a responsible way. That only comes back to, unfortunately hurt the proponents of the 2A cause. So you got to train. That's kind of motto number one. If you are into shooting, especially if you're into concealed carry, you need to train, and you need to train regularly, or else you're going to lose it. So a lot of people are like, okay, yeah, I'm into training or I want to train, but ammo's so expensive and I got to drive to the range and there's so much time spent there and money spent there. And dry fire is the answer. If there is anyone listening that is not, I don't want to say worshiper of dry fire, but a strong believer or proponent or acceptor of dry fire, please open your heart to the possibility.
Reconsider, yeah.
It offers to you. It's cheaper and more convenient, and it's massively effective. People say, well, there's the Big Bang. And I'm like, well, Big Bang happens after. All the important stuff happens before. Now, for rapid fire stuff and multi-shot engagements, yes, the follow-on shots and recoil management come into play, but that trigger control, that basic fundamental, can you get the bullet to go where the sights are aligned, that can be dialed in like nothing else in dry fire. All the best shooters in the world, competitive, military, whatever, they do about 80 to 90% of their practice dry fire because of its efficiency. And we did a study where we looked at 10 million shots that people had taken through Mantis. And we said, okay, what is the data, because we're a data-driven company, like you said, what does the data tell us about dry fire versus live fire in training? Because we know people have certain tendencies or deficiencies in live fire. They have those same tendencies and deficiencies in dry fire. And we found out that, yes, they do. The same issues that people have in live fire, they have in dry fire, even without the Big Bang. Is it accentuated as much? No, but it's the same issue. So if you can root it out in dry fire, you can root it out in live fire, is what that story told us, what the data told us. So it wasn't just making it up, it's kind of a surprising discovery for us. We expected people to have different issues in dry fire than they did in live fire. We found the opposite to be true. And then the other thing you talked about, thresholds. This student that you had, you're trying to get him to 1,000 shots. So we did part of this analysis of 10 million shots. We looked at how long does it take to achieve a certain level of proficiency? Because that's what everyone wants to know. Right? Okay, I'm willing to train, or I want to run a 5K, or I want to run a marathon.
Right.
How much work is it going to take me to get there?
What's the goal or target? Yeah.
Right, and ultimately, is it worth it? Right. So if I'm going to invest in doing dry fire training, like how much do I have to do? Because dry fire training is not necessarily fun. We gamified a little bit in the app to make it more interesting and engaging, but it's work. It's training, right? It is not watching a movie, sipping margaritas on the beach. This is part of the routine. If you want to, again, be responsible and be competent, you have to engage in training. So we looked at what's the learning curve look like? What's the improvement curve look like when you're doing dry fire training? Now, this is with Mantis. So you're getting feedback. It's not just doing dime washer drills or just pulling the trigger. Like, you're getting feedback, and so it's a more efficient process than just pulling the trigger or various other alternatives. But what we found is within 1,000 rounds, people. So the average. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here. Mantis scores every single shot, which is a score of the quality of your trigger control. Essentially, there's other factors that go into it, but that's the core of it. And 100 is perfect. No one ever gets 100. Oh, that's not true. Occasionally people get 100, but things got to be pretty much locked in a vice, where you got, hands of steel. But even then, 99 is very, very rare. The average shooter is about 70 when they start off. So they're shooting with Mantis the first time. The average about 70. Obviously, that's the average. So people are below that. People are above that. Which, incidentally, as a side tangent, no pun intended. We noticed that that's actually what law enforcement averages is about a 70.
Step your game up, suckers.
Yeah. So the average cop who carries and has to qualify with their firearm is no better a shooter on average, but there are exceptions like Mike Doyle that are no better on average than the average civilian shooter, which I hope there's any officers here that they're listening intently to realize the implications of that.
Should be alarming.
Yeah, it should be alarming. Now, a 70 is not a terrible score. Obviously, you can go all the way down to 0, but that is going to give you about a 6-inch group at 10 yards. And that's slow static shooting. So if you can't get your group higher than that at 10 yards in a slow static shooting environment, what is it going to be like when you're in, adrenaline pumping, running a gun? Like, you're going to be all over the place. There could be, I'm not going to hypothesize what what could happen, right?
Yeah,
what could go wrong there?
Well, and this is the thing that people have to be able to contextualize, is that a 70 might be fine if you're standing, it's not, you have to go in, you have to look at this deeper than just the score on the screen, right? And you see, okay, what is a 70? What does that get you? That a 6-inch group at 10 yards. Okay, now let's go out and actually do that on the range. Can you shoot a 6-inch group at 10 yards just standing static, like you said? If you're 5 or 7 yards away from a guy, that might be fine. But to be able to read into those situations and say, is that fine enough? Is it always going to be fine enough? Is that the only engagement I'm ever preparing for? And I'll give you the other example that I see where I see this play out for cops is we shoot shooting qualifications that start at about 25 yards. And it's always those first couple courses of fire at 25 yards that guys are all over the place. And they'll fail the qual just based off of that 25-yard course of fire.
Yep. And you got to be pretty dialed in, 25 yards. So the question that comes back to how do I know if my dry fire practice is working? How much do I have to work to get to that level of proficiency? So we noticed that when people got to about 1,000 rounds with dry fire with Mantis, they were about that 90 score on average, which is at 10 yards, about a 2-inch group, that's solid. I mean, that's tight, right? Yeah. So 25 yards, we're looking at about a 5-6-inch group, probably closer to 5-inch group at 10 yards, 5-inch group at 25 yards, that's going to get you qualified, right?
Yeah. I mean, we're talking headshots, right? I mean, if you needed to. That's significant. That's significant.
So that's our mantra: 1,000 dry fire reps. Now it can't be over the course of 2 years, right? Within a reasonable period of time.
Yeah.
Get with feedback will get you to really where we kind of feel is competent carrying level.
Yeah. So. And this 1,000 shots thing I mentioned, a friend of mine I've been working with teaching how to shoot, and she actually texted me one time. She's like, "Have you ever gotten 100?" She's like, I got like a 99.7, and why can't I ever get 100? And I'm like, don't stress it too much. I said, I don't shoot those either. But it's funny. I mean, that's the thing is like you said, you could use this in so many different ways. And on the instructor side of it, I mean, I can go right in the app, and she's got her account, and she could be at home dry firing on her own, and I can go in there and I can look at the shots. And I think what instructors have to recognize, because my next question is about some of the skeptics out there. And just to kind of front load this, I think of a lot of instructors, they see that front page when you go into like open training on the Mantis app, and you see a score, and you see, possible causes of what that score is, and that's it. And they forget that if you scroll over a couple pages, you can actually see a map that shows the movement of the gun. So if they're moving the gun low and left right before each shot, you can see it. Like it actually draws it out for you. And that's probably the most valuable feature as an instructor. If you're looking for something that they're consistently doing that might be a problem, so the instructors out there need to not discount the value of this as a teaching tool as well. And that's dry fire and live fire. You can use it out in live fire as well. So what about the skeptics? What are the guys that one time, long time ago, I was in a conversation with somebody about the Mantis, and they're like, "You're better off spending $200 on ammo or taking a class." And I go, "I don't know about that. I've gotten a lot more than $200 worth of training out of this thing." What would you say to those people? What are some of the misconceptions?
Good question. So I'd say, number one, you can spend $200 on ammo or $200 on a class, and those are both valuable things to do. At the end of those, you don't have any ammo, and you don't have class anymore. Whereas you have Mantis, right? The value continues, right? It's not like an either or purchase. Like people, we have users that have tens of thousands of shots with the Mantis. We have several that are in the 6 figures. Well, quite a few that are in 6 figures actually. So you think about especially the ammo prices nowadays, people have saved thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars on ammunition by using Mantis. So massive cost savings. And again, you're getting dry fire with feedback. So you're improving. So after the first few hundred rounds, like you paid for it. And then after that, all the training is free. So that's number one. Number two, I would say absolutely go to a class. Like they're very valuable. There are things that an instructor can teach you that Mantis can't. And that's okay. And we recognize that and support that. We're not trying to get rid of instructors. We're just trying to make them better. having said that, if you go to a class and then come home and do nothing, again, perishable skill, you're going to lose it. What was the value of that class besides knowledge in your head? It's got to be knowledge in your hands. And so Mantis helps you put that knowledge to practice and validate the usefulness, the utility of that knowledge to say, did this work? Did this not work? It's kind of a truth machine in some sense. That it validates a technique or an approach or method to say, well, did I get a higher score? Did I not get a higher score? Or, my scores in dry fire today are a little bit lower. Maybe I need to revisit some of that stuff again. So that they amplify each other, classes and instructors and Mantis.
Synergy, you might say.
They are synergistic. I would say the other critique we've heard, you alluded to it briefly on the main screen. There's a possible causes section. So what we do is some heuristical analysis. We look at the motion pattern. We say, this movement that we saw before the shot, and we say it could be possibly caused by, say, your trigger finger placement on the trigger, or it could be caused by grip issues, or you might be heeling the gun a little bit, or you might be milking the grip while you're squeezing it. While you're squeezing the trigger, you might be milking the whole grip. So, and there are people call it the pie chart. There's it's been around for years. These paper charts, and you can buy them at ranges where you can shoot them and it'll diagnose certain things. And there's some correlation between that and what we have in the app. And people like to debunk those charts, thinking that they were originally designed for one-handed revolver shooters, one-handed bullseye revolver shooters. They say that was created for that, so it's not applicable here. And of course, we listen to feedback. And so when people were critical of that, we said, well, the data does not lie. So whenever there's a disagreement of opinion, we say, what data can we look at to say, is this true or not? And what we use to validate those possible causes, and again, it says possible causes, it doesn't see guaranteed causes.
Exactly, yeah.
is we did pattern matching. We said, well, if we induce this error on the gun, does it cause this particular movement pattern? And the answer is yes. So the same issues that you have with one hand, you're going to have with two hands unless you compensate for it with the support hand. And so, which you can do, by the way, and a lot of people do. That's stronger support hand grip, like your instructor was telling you. It's a solution to many problems. But at the core, you also have to be good one-handed. Again, small tangent here, but we practice so routinely with two hands because that's how it's the most stable grip, gets the best shots off. But in real life scenario, you may not have an opportunity to do that. You could be wounded. You may not have accessibility to that hand. You may need to shoot off. You understand better than I do all the different scenarios where you need to be proficient with your firearm. But regardless, back on track here, what we found with that analysis was that those issues, those mechanic issues, do cause those specific movement patterns. And when people saw those coaching tips and implemented them, their scores improved. So validated the whole system of systems, if you would, in terms of the approach there. I would also say that the other benefit that Mantis has over, just using a paper bullseye chart or pie chart or whatever they want to call them, what Mantis does is it isolates the shooter mechanics from the target. So for the last hundreds and hundreds of years, for analyzing our mechanics, we look at the target. And when we describe the shooting experience, it's kind of like a book. And the target is like the last page in the book. And Mantis really tells you the whole story. It doesn't tell you that last page, but it tells you that whole story. So where that bullet lands is a combination of factors of obviously the shooter mechanics, it could be the ammo, the gun, how it's sighted, how you sight the gun, wind conditions, weather conditions, etc. But we isolate the shooter mechanics from all that other stuff, which is always the biggest factor influencing where that bullet goes. So historically, people their sights might be off, or they might not, or they might think they are. They might make that claim. Well, again, Mantis is the truth machine that tells you, is it you, or is it the gun, or is it the sights? What is the issue really going on here? So it helps you really fix and diagnose those issues better. So I would say those are the common, I say, critiques that we get. Again, people think it's a gimmick or a toy out the gate, never having used it because they see a little, Bluetooth device that connects to an app. It's uncomfortable for them to see training or shooting in a different way. But again, our mantra is that the data does not lie. And so if you use it and improve, that's the data that we need that supports, that says this, whatever it is in it, it's working and it's improving people. We've done tests and studies internally. There's been external tests done by the military as well as law enforcement groups that have used a Mantis, kind of A/B testing, saying this group's going to use it, this group's not. What's the differences that we notice in improvement? And across the board, the story is consistently people improve faster using Mantis than without. And that's even with instruction, even with other competing factors. You can't compete really with data-driven feedback. We are wired as humans to integrate feedback and improving. And if that data is pure and truthful and quantitative, we can improve more efficiently.
Yeah, there's a lot of little pearls in there, and I really liked not just knowledge in your head, it's got to be knowledge in your hands. I wrote that one down as you were saying that, because that's exactly it. And even as a guy that's been shooting for a little while and has to maintain a relatively high standard in my line of work, I can know that I'm anticipating the shot and throwing rounds low because I'm yanking the trigger. I can know that, right? But that that doesn't help me until I turn that knowledge into behavior, right? And into, like you said, where it has to transfer out to your hands and make me shoot whatever it is that I'm trying to shoot.
So let me ask you this. You've done some work on the law enforcement side. I don't know if you can talk about this here, but in terms of Mantis in your professional career, what impacts have you seen from being able to use it in that environment? If you can speak to that here.
I can, obviously. So that was actually the next thing I was going to get into was my agency, which shall remain nameless, of course. All the recruits get an X10 when they get their gun, and they start dry firing as soon as we can get them. They've got to get the basic safety class first, and they've got to get some instruction on the mechanics. But what we have seen is, and I've got some, my spreadsheets aren't as technical as the one behind Austin right now, but I've made some spreadsheets and tracked some of that data. And what I see is the guys that go home and do the work that are actually putting in those shots. When you look at their targets and when they qualify, one, as an instructor, you could see it. You could see that they're doing the work. They're the better shooters. And two, you see that their scores tend to be on average much higher when we actually get to qualification than everybody else. And so it is a noticeable difference. But the other things that I would like to take it, and this is just Mike talking, this isn't my agency. I'm a firearms instructor, but I don't run the firearms program. So I'm just a contributor, I would say. But if Mike was king for a day, what I would like to see us do is one, anytime I'm assigned a remedial student that needs help, the Mantis is the first thing that I'm taking out. And I would like to see it get used more mainstream with any remedial shooters to include, okay, you need to take this thing home. Here's your homework assignments. You need to log so many shots. These are the drills I want you to do, whatever. I would also like to see it tracked. I'd actually like to take it to my tactical team. And those are all, I would say, intermediate to advanced shooters. Some are better than others. Some guys put in more work on their own beyond just the team training. Being on a tactical team, we have to be proficient in shooting, but we also have like a laundry list of other things that we have to do. And I see the Mantis fitting in really well with the work and the training that we do on the tactical team. I haven't gotten to experiment with that yet, but that's where I'd like to see this thing go. But what are some other ways that you're seeing agencies and instructors using them, and the military you mentioned as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are currently today, Mantis is used by, talk about the Marine Corps first. Marine Corps brought us on, did some tests. They do all their basic training at two facilities, South Carolina and California, Parris Island and San Diego. And every single recruit at Parris Island, which is about half the Marine Corps new recruits, uses Mantis as part of their basic training. So they do a week of dry fire before they do a week of live fire. And so every single new recruit there is exposed to and utilizes it during the dry fire week. And they're expanded to include live fire as well. It's not a standard issue. They just have a bunch of Mantis units they use there. And on the West Coast, they're in the process of acquiring. So sometime this year, 100% of all new Marine recruits will use Mantis as part of their basic training.
Wow.
So that's validation of they notice this improves our qualification rates. This improves our scores. This improves proficiency of a firearm. This is not obviously their final duty station. There's a lot more firearm training that has to go into it, but it gets them up that learning curve so much faster.
Yeah, that's a testament right there.
Testament right there. Army did a separate study on it and showed a significantly noticeable improvement. So they're in the process of acquiring a a number of units for, so basically the equivalent on the infantry training side for the Army. Their plan is to implement and roll that out for all new recruits in the infantry side. We're working on some projects with a bunch of National Guard and Army Reserve units as well. Again, they see the value and are close to adopting it. Most major agencies are using it to some extent. It's really a question of culture. Are they invested in firearms marksmanship improvement, or are they more distracted by, concerns about lawsuits and body cams, and just other stuff like that? Those that are invested in firearms training, the value that it has, it's a no-brainer. Those that aren't, they have some, they use them, but it's just not part of their culture yet. But hope to get there someday.
I have to capitalize on what you just said there, because this is a theme that comes up a lot in the show. Being distracted by some of the administrative stuff, right? And we have to worry about those things. I get it, right? We have to think about liability. We have to think about, I'm sympathetic to that. I get it. But what I think people who get too wrapped up in that are missing is the difference between the process and the results, right? And they're a little too results based. They're worried about, how is this going to look at the end picture, at the end state? Like you said, it's not telling the whole story. You're seeing the target, or potentially the innocent bystanders that catch rounds they shouldn't be catching, right? Instead of thinking about the process of, how do we make people better shooters so that we avoid those negative outcomes from the get-go? And that's the key. And if you get people, like you said, culturally invested in that, then everything else comes together. And the Mantis is just it's like a key piece of that puzzle in my eyes, because this is the kind of thing that you can come home with, and like you mentioned, you can't just like learn in the academy, go home, and that's it. You never train again, and that's oh well, I qualify once a year or whatever, so I'm good. No, you're not good. You're not good, because you don't know if your next shooting or your first shooting is going to require a 70 or a 90, or you have 1 second or 5 seconds. You don't know that, right? And so making it a thing where you come home, or at the beginning of a shift, you spend a few minutes dry firing and just kicking the rust off. You have the Mantis there to give you some feedback. Focusing on that part of the process will get you the desirable results. And I think it's really easy for people to get distracted by that. And I understand we have to worry about some of that to some degree, right? But let's not get too wrapped up in it, right? That's what I see.
Yeah, and I've never been in your shoes in terms of on the beat, patrolling and dealing with different circumstances. But in life in general, those critical situations when there's a million things going on, adrenaline's pumping. You have to make 1,000 little tiny decisions about what you say, how you act, what you do, what you don't do, what you can do, what you can't do, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. And if you have confidence in marksmanship, there's a lot of questions that don't have to be answered, or decisions that don't have to be made. You can focus intently on other factors surrounding that situation.
Yes.
If you feel lack of confidence in there, all of a sudden opens up a whole nother door of a barrage of decisions that you have to wrestle with and deal with in the situation. I think it's crippling and disabling.
And there's some research for that. If you look into the human performance stuff, tangent again, I'm sorry. It's just what we do. It's what we do. But there's some human performance research out there that talks about the subconscious appraisal process, right? Where you're faced with a situation and subconsciously your brain is deciding, is this something that I can manage? And what happens in that appraisal process affects how serious of a sympathetic nervous response you get. And when you start going off the rails, that's when you start losing the ability, not only cognitively to perceive and function and process stuff, but also those fine motor skills like shooting and all those things will start to deteriorate. So that this is, again, there's a lot of research to support that, and having those skills to a point where, like, I got this. Like I know I can shoot. Okay, if I have to take a headshot at 25 yards, that's a difficult shot. This is what it will require. And I know that because I've done that, and I've performed that in training in different circumstances, and I have that wired. And it sounds silly, but like if I talk to my student that I was telling you about and I go, hey, I want this next shot to be a 90 or better, just being able functionally to be like, okay, I know what that feels like. Like I know, and again, not only in my head, but in my hands, right?
Right.
I know what that feels like. I can make that happen. That's potentially life-saving.
Right.
And that's what people need to see here.
Yeah. When you answer the question can or can't, when you get that out of the way, then should or shouldn't is the next barrier, right? And you can't answer the first two, you can't answer the next ones. And again, like I said, it opens up a whole Pandora's box, of things that of other things you have to investigate and explore if the answer to that first one is I can't. So we're hopefully enabling the cans that then limit the stratification of the possibilities of what can happen in an unfortunate event that we hope never happens, but unfortunately we have to reconcile with.
Yeah.
So.
And the can and can't, this applies even to like things like fighting, because getting past can or can't to should or shouldn't, your shoot, no shoot decisions. I mean, how many times we've seen the body cameras, right, of the oh shit bangs, like where people are freaking out and panicked, and they, it's not because they're thinking clearly when they yank that trigger, right? And that should or shouldn't is, you need to be able to get past the competence, right, the automaticity required to make those shots, and really be able to focus in on, is this a shoot situation or not, right? That's a huge deal.
Right.
Wow. So we went.
I remember seeing, and maybe you saw this, John Correa on Excel Connection. He posted a video from your hometown, Phoenix. Well, not, you're in Tucson, right? But
yeah,
where there was the guy who took the baby hostage.
Yeah. And
this was downtown Phoenix or somewhere.
Yeah, Phoenix is all one big blob to me, but
yeah. But long story short, a cop did a headshot. I forget the distance, but just nailed it first shot. And watching the body cam footage and watching and listening to it as well, you could sense there was calmness, there was a surety, and saved the baby's life, right? Calmness, there's a surety and a confidence that just enabled the things to go the right way. If he had not been able to make that shot, there was the time window, what could happen if that situation extended on for a longer period of time? If that distance between, the cops and the perpetrator, it had to get narrower. Again, like all these things that could have gone more and more wrong.
Oh yeah.
If he hadn't had that just innate calm, I got this. This is what is needed right now, and I can do this. I'm going to take care of it right now, and boom, it was over.
Yeah.
It went a lot faster than that was, again, imperfect situation, horrible situation. But the response to it was about as perfect as you could get, because underpinning all of that stuff was core marksmanship confidence.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And we talk about this a lot, right? And this is a personal responsibility bit that I have to get into as it relates specifically to law enforcement, because obviously that's my jam, right? One, you're not going to get to pick the day. This is another common theme that we talk about on the show. You don't get to pick the day, right? The enemy gets a vote and all those, neat little sayings. But when the time to perform arrives, the time to prepare has passed. And so in that window where you've got this child who's depending on you to do something, right? There's a whole bunch of outcomes. And with every passing second, those outcomes get, up to and including you decide to try your best and take a shot and hit the baby instead, right?
Yep.
Don't be that guy. I mean, there's just, on no planet is that going to be okay, or are you going to be able to live with that? And so your own personal responsibility has to take in, has to be accounted for in this. And so, your agency's not going to do it for you, right? And I'd like to think, no agency out there is forcing their people to listen to this show. So I would like to think that people listening to the show are the types of people who are going to do the work and probably already do. But this is what plays into stepping your game up, is thinking about things like that, because like Austin is saying, he immediately knew what was required of him, and he was able to perform those skills on demand, right? And so in performing those skills on demand, he eliminated a whole bunch of other possible bad outcomes. So I think that's key, and I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that when we talk about what the Mantis does for us, because that's exactly what it does for me. And I'll tell you, again, your agency's not going to do it for you. Your instructors can't do it for you. You can complain and be disgruntled and burnt out or whatever. But I can tell you, for me, if I want to be comfortable taking that shot, that's where I'm taking that. And the Mantis helps me get there. And that's real talk. I use it all the time. Well, cool. There's some good stuff in there. I like it.
Yeah, and I would just kind of come a little bit full circle back to the initial part. This is, if you believe in the fundamental right, you also have to believe in the fundamental responsibility.
Absolutely.
And the only thing that maintains rights is responsible exercising of those rights. And training is a huge component, if not the largest component of that.
Yeah. And in the concealed carry world especially, or open carry if that's your thing, but concealed and open carry world especially, with those rights, there's not a whole lot of requirement in the realm of how good do you have to be. And it's like, well, again, you don't get to pick the day. How good do you have to be? As good as the situation requires. So you might as well put in the work. And with the challenging component of, I'm fortunate with where I work. I have access to instructors, and I get to go out to the range and shoot as part of my job. And most everyday citizens might not get that. It's hard. It's hard to go out to the range, like you said, around your job, around family life, around buying ammo at crazy prices, if you can even find it, which is a big thing now, obviously. And then finding quality instructors. I mean, sure, you could go find some guy at the gun shop. I'm not going to promise you he's going to be great, right? So
Right.
It is a challenge. And again, the Mantis helps you get there. So all that being said, which I think is great, and all of this I think speaks really well with just the message of the show and the stuff that we do. So I hope you guys get something out of that. But I do want to talk about some of the new stuff. Mantis has all kinds of new gear going on. I mean, it started with this little motion tracking device that you put on your gun. They have also got the Blackbeard, which is a trigger resetting device that goes into an AR platform, and you can pull the trigger and reset your trigger. And the Laser Academy thing, Austin, can you talk about some of these new things you got going on?
Yeah, great question. So we, again, build products for ourselves. That's where we see deficiencies, where we see opportunity for improving our shooting. And so a couple other categories we've created. So Mantis X is the original category of training that doesn't need a special target. You can do dry fire, live fire, any firearm. You're good to go. It doesn't give you, like we said, point of impact feedback, and which a lot of people like. A lot of people are used to that. So we created, laser training has been popular for a while. We created another software-based, app-based platform called Laser Academy that you insert into the chamber a laser bullet, laser cartridge. Then when the hammer striker hits, it spits a laser out front, and the app uses the camera on the phone to read location of hits on the target, scores it automatically, a bunch of guided drills, and we're adding courses. Again, lots of software features coming in the future. Very fun platform to use. It is a bit gamified as well to make it more interesting. You can do duels with people, so you're not just shooting solo.
That's awesome.
Again, not all
get me that.
Not all training has to be boring, and the more fun it can be as long as it's useful and not just fun. And it can be useful and fun simultaneously. It engages people at a new level. And it also validates a lot of the training that Mantis does. So we view Laser Academy and Mantis X as separate but complementary systems. So if you want to use them at the same time, cool. If you want to use them separately, cool. They both achieve different purposes, different dimensions of your training. Blackbeard is, like you said, a trigger resetting system for your AR-15. How it works is you pull out your bolt carrier group and a charging handle. You drop in the single piece replacement, and then replace the magazine with our magazine. So it's a 2-piece install. It takes literally 15 seconds. In fact, if you want to do it right now, I'll show you. You guys can listen to it. So this is one. I'm popping the pin to start in the quote-unquote install now. First pin's popped. I pull out the bolt carrier group, charging handle. I put the new bolt carrier group in, close it up. There's that. I pop the mag in, and I'm ready to go. So in about 10 seconds, I converted my AR-15 into a dry fire machine. And since this is an audio only, this is what you can hear. You heard a little bit of buzz as I inserted the magazine. But when you squeeze that trigger, it's a dry fire. It's a sweet click and a sweet reset. It's the actual weight break and reset of your trigger. There's nothing to modify the trigger at all. So you get training, again, on your own weapon platform that you want to get indexed to and tied into intently and intimately. So it just drops it in and resets the hammer as quickly as you pull that trigger. And you can go as fast as you want to on this thing. We haven't found anyone that can outrun it with their trigger finger. So we can do 10 shots a second. The battery lasts forever, and it's rechargeable. So
Literally forever.
Forever. You have tens of thousands of shots out of a single charge on that magazine. And it also has an integrated laser. So let's put a laser out the front. So you can see, again, location of misses and hits. And it's useful in Laser Academy as well as some other systems that we are building, but won't talk about here, but maybe on a future show. So really for AR platform, it resets the trigger. That's the pain about dry fires. You got to reset. You got to cycle the slide, reset the trigger. This does it for you automatically on AR-15. And yes, we're working on other stuff related to that for other platforms.
Awesome. The Laser Academy thing is, so the Blackbeard is cool. And what's nice is, you can use like scaled size targets, and I can put on all my SWAT gear and work with my rifle and start toying with stuff that in conjunction with the Mantis, right?
Yep. Separate but complementary.
Right. And so you can start to work on things that, when I go out to a training day and it's a structured thing, I mean, I'm doing whatever drills whoever's running the line is putting me through, or I'm running a drill for people. So there's not a lot of windows to kind of toy and experiment with, but you could take this thing out even at home or in your garage or whatever and start messing with things like, sling placement stuff, or, how you're mounting your optic and your cheek. Well, there's a lot of little things that you can tie in with that now you have this trigger reset option, which is huge. It's pretty awesome. So I got to get more on the Laser Academy side of things where I get my camera set up with the targets. That thing's pretty cool, and I just haven't toyed with it much yet.
Yeah, they're both a lot of fun. Again, both add different dimensions to your training. A dry fire with an AR sucks because running that charging handle breaking position it's bad. I mean, it's just notoriously painful. Not physically painful, but mentally painful, exhausting. When we hear a lot of people that, the first time they get their Blackbeard, they spend, open it up and they spend 2 hours practicing clearing their house. Right?
Yeah.
You've never been able to do that before. You really, in a meaningful, interesting, substantial way, but Blackbeard really enables that. So super stoked about that, as well as Laser Academy and the difference it can make for helping, again, shooters at all levels improve.
Yeah, the Blackbeard thing, doing, a lot of people think they have like this idea in their head that rifles, AR-15s are pretty easy to shoot, and like, who needs to dry fire a rifle? And it's, if you're not challenging yourself when you're dry firing a rifle, you're missing out, because especially with the Blackbeard, you could do target transitions, multiple targets, shooting on the move, which is huge. I mean, again, you talk about going through your house. If you want to do, as you're coming around corner and you're moving and see where your shots are landing, you can do that with the Blackbeard and take multiple shots. You don't get that one single dry fire, and now you have to rack the charging handle again. It's like you said, it's kind of a pain. So Austin, this has been awesome. I got to thank you guys for the tangible support that you guys have given us. Austin and Mantis took a chance on us when we were, we're still relatively new at this whole thing, but we were especially new back then when they first helped us out. The improvements that you guys have helped us achieve have to do with just workflow, and we were able to bring in a guy to help us with a lot of the production and stuff on the back end, dealing, website and social media and a lot of things that, we're still working on around, our own, like I said, full-time jobs and kids and all that stuff. So it has been infinitely helpful, and I appreciate that. And I also really like the opportunity to spread the word about Mantis, because like I said, this is stuff that I really believe in. I use it myself. I use it with new shooters. I think anyone who takes being proficient and being serious with a gun seriously needs to get on board and needs to use it. So I actually, again, I mentioned this in the beginning, guys, like this is not about, we only partner with people who we think bring value to you, right? And I think Mantis is one of those things that I'd like to see more people use. And so it is my honor and privilege, and I appreciate the opportunity to help spread that word in a meaningful way. And so I hope people will go out and get you some and get one. I really do use it. I legitimately believe in this stuff. And so that's a real endorsement. It's not, I'm not a salesman, guys. That's not my background. So
awesome. Well, happy to support you guys. You guys are doing good work spreading the good word about responsible firearm ownership, which we are 100% behind.
Absolutely. So if you guys want to learn more about Mantis, obviously you can head over to their website, mantisx.com. And Austin, any other resources or places people should be looking for material or info about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, obviously our website, mantisx.com. You can find us on social media, but we spend more time doing R&D than we do, trolling the internet and trying to look cool or whatever. But generally we say, if you're interested, go read reviews. We can talk about ourselves all we want to, but really we care about what you think and how it can help you. And if you want unbiased reviews, go search them out. There's lots of them out there. And generally unanimous in the affirmative that the stuff we make will help improve your shooting. It certainly improved our own shooting, and it continues to do so. And we hope it will do that same thing for you.
Yeah, it will. I mean, it helps me. So, all right, guys, that's all we got. Good talk.